Well, we'll get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Sid Ziegler. I'm from Outsports.com. Thank you for joining us for this conversation about building support groups for LGBTQ student athletes on campus. We have four amazing people here who have all done that or something darn close to it. Just a little housekeeping. If you have a question, feel free to include it in the chat. And then I'll make sure that all the panelists hear it. Without further ado, I'll introduce the amazing folks who are joining us, starting with Maggie Grossman, who plays soccer for Fordham University. Also from Fordham University, Jaden Vasquez, who plays football. And one of the neat things is we get to hear two different perspectives of starting a same group, two different people. We got Jade Hines Clark, who played basketball at the University of Richmond. I'm screwed, and here I am already messing up the names. Jaden Vasquez, we went through this before we started and I still messed it up. And Carolyn Matthijs, who played tennis and graduated from Monmouth University. So just as a quick starter, I'd love to just get each of you to talk about the organization that you started. And Maggie, let's just start with you. Just kind of talk about what the organization is and what were the initial stages of how to get it off the ground?
Yeah, so our organization is called Fordham Connect, and it started as it was a mental health support group. We just started this semester, so that's what we wanted to create, was a mental health support group for our student athletes, because we felt that there wasn't really anywhere for us to go so that we could just talk to each other without administrators or coaches present. It was always facilitated by the administrators and coaches if we were going to have these conversations. So we wanted to create a place where we could just talk to each other. So that was kind of like how I just reached out to our athletic director, Ed Cole, and our associate athletic director, Janan Paul. And I was just like, I think that we really need a group. And after kind of a month of planning, Janan was like, I think we should have some subgroups with more focused discussions. And so we created basically some sub discussion groups. There's an LGBTQ discussion group, there's a BIPOC athlete discussion group, and there's a female athlete discussion group. So that's basically how it came to be. Jaden is the head executive for our LGBT subgroup, so he runs the discussions for our LGBT subgroup, and then I run the discussions for our general meetings, and then we have executive leaders for our other two groups as well. So if Jaden wants to talk about our LGBT side of things, take it away.
Yeah, when Maggie reached out to me, I love the idea, just because LGBTQ topics are very taboo in athletics, and I know that there's a lot of people that feel like even if they're out, they're still hiding it within themselves because there's no place for them to talk about it, because it's not really something brought up on the field or the locker room. And having something that is who you are and you can't speak about it really has a heavy effect on people. So when she reached out, I just understood the impact that it could have on our LGBTQ athletes. And so that's what really drove me to starting it.
Take myself off mute, that would be good. We're 6 months into this pandemic and we're still talking on mute. I love it. And how have you, Jaden, gone about identifying some LGBTQ athletes to reach out to?
We kind of put it out there. It gets sent to everyone's email that's a Fordham student athlete. We have Instagram, which is Fordham Connect. Am I right, Maggie? And we have weekly posts about when our discussion groups will be, as well as other mental health topics that we will focus on. And one thing that we really push is that you don't have to be out to come to our meetings. We do this because I know that there are a lot of closeted athletes because the atmosphere of sports doesn't really, it's not really a welcoming place for LGBTQ athletes. And so that's a big thing. We just want to let people know that you don't have to identify as anything to come to our meetings, because we don't want to force anyone to have come out.
Caroline, have you taken the same perspective that, you know, you want it to be a safe space for people, whether they're out or not?
Yes, I think anybody who starts and wants to start an inclusive group wants it to be that inclusive. And so you don't want to force anybody to feel uncomfortable or feel like they have to be somebody or whatever. I do have a question for Jaden, actually. How do you think your attendance has been to those meetings? Are the LGBT meetings separate from the Fordham Connect meetings as a whole? And how do you think your attendance has been? Not specifying that people don't have to be out in order to come to the meetings.
Yeah, one thing that we found is that there's a good collective of people that come to all of our meetings, each discussion group, which is awesome. And I love that they want to educate themselves and also be in the conversation. But one thing that we were afraid of is that the LGBTQ subgroup would be a lot smaller than the other ones, which we found was not the case. There's a good amount of LGBTQ athletes and an equal amount of straight athletes, but hopefully we're getting more. I know there's still a lot of athletes on our campus that have no idea about it because this is a fairly new group. So right now we're just kind of figuring out ways how we can reach more people.
Well, I have to imagine starting an organization and then having a pandemic hit can't be helping.
Yeah.
Jade, I just want to get you in here just to, again, introduce you in the organization that you're part of, because yours isn't just focused on student athletes, it's focused on LGBTQ students of color. Kind of talk about that, and then also how you have made sure that athletes feel included.
Yes, thank you. So the organization that I co-founded is called Shades of Pride. And so it's an LGBTQ affinity group for students of color for the entire campus. And so, you know, I kind of was in my junior year, it was 2018. And I was like, well, I've been out, and I've been out since high school. And I was like, well, I feel like I haven't connected with other LGBTQ people of color on my campus. And so I got with a friend and was like, do you want to do this with me? And that's kind of how it started. But we wanted to be, like you said, like some of you have already mentioned, we wanted to be very intentional and protect confidentiality was our biggest thing. So we beat ourselves up about whether we were going to have an Instagram page, because with that, if I follow an Instagram page and anybody can see and click through and see who follows that Instagram page, that's one of the things that we were kind of concerned about, is like, how do we protect, everybody who wants to be in this group and actually make it feel like it's a safe space. And so, knowing that maybe, the larger campus population would have more LGBTQ people of color is why I didn't want to go strictly into stay within student athletes, because I figured if it was for the whole campus, we would get some student athletes in there naturally. But like some of you have mentioned, turnout is hard, but I think for us, we were just kind of like, if 4 people show up to the group, we're fine with that, because that's 4 people who know that they can come to this group and there's people here for them. And so, this year I'm serving as a graduate assistant for U of R, so I'm still facilitating for the group. And this year, the first meeting, we had 16 people out. And, for University of Richmond, 16 people out at a first meeting is pretty big, considering in our first year, we had 5 in our first meeting. So I think it's been great to see kind of like how it's grown, but also making sure we're really being intentional about making sure everybody knows that this isn't a space for them. And one of the things that we did to kind of combat the confidentiality is to have a listserv. And so the listserv, because there has been a concern about, I don't want to follow the page because anybody can see who follows the page. So the listserv we manage the listserv. Only one faculty member and myself are able to see everyone who's on it, and send out emails so that they still feel like they can be engaged without following our outward social media.
How have other of you addressed that issue of anonymity, making sure that whether people are out or not, they feel safe coming? 'Cause I remember, at Stanford, we had an LGBTQ center. The last place I was ever going to actually step foot in, because you're making a statement as soon as you step foot in that group, in that place. How have you addressed that issue?
Oh, go ahead, Maggie.
Okay. I was gonna say that Jaden and I we went on a call with I'm forgetting his name. His name Yannick. What's his last name, Jaden?
Coach?
Coach. I don't know. It's German, but he works in like diversity and inclusion and stuff at the NCAA, and he was awesome. And that was one of the first things we asked him, because I mean we weren't more concerned with like at Fordham athletes following our Instagram pages because it is like you can just come to the general meetings and stuff. So it's just like it's like because it's like a mental health organization first and then subgroup discussion, like not second, but like you kind of get my drift. And so we were more just concerned with the like people showing up, like what that was going to look like, and whether people who were like in a dangerous situation at home or even on campus or like with their teams would feel comfortable coming. So our first thing that we did is we really emphasized like that allies are welcome to come, and like I told all my friends, like you better be at the LGBT discussion, like please come. And like Jaden always asks like what do the allies think of this, what can our allies do to be better, and someone can come on and just like be an ally and not have to be anything but that. So I think that was like our first approach. And the second thing that we asked Yannick was like, what do we do if someone doesn't even feel comfortable like talking to us about like coming out, if they're struggling with that, if they're in a really dangerous situation. And something that we're like in the process of developing is an anonymous survey where if someone is in a dangerous situation, they can input their information like completely anonymously to Fordham and be connected with an outside and former NCAA like LGBT like person, so that they can mentor them and like help them, and it's completely separate from Fordham. So we would not know who this was or who's getting help, but like they can get the help they need and feel safe about it because it's someone that they don't know and who doesn't know them.
Yeah, to go off Maggie, one thing I make sure to say before every single meeting is thank you for joining. I just want to emphasize that you don't have to be gay or identify with the community to be in this meeting. And just really saying that just makes everyone feel comfortable, because I know my straight teammates, they're very accepting, but some of them might still feel weird if in any way for joining this meeting, because they feel like someone's gonna assume that they're LGBTQ, which they are working on, because there's no problem with being gay and it's encouraged to be out. But to also go off what Maggie said, I lost my train of thought.
Well, let me get to Carolyn because I have a question
Yeah.
for her, not just this question about anonymity, but I'd also love to hear about what kind of resources you've gotten from your administration or coaches that have helped move along the organization.
Sure. So at Monmouth, it started, like you said, it's hard to start an organization and then have a pandemic hit. And so we really were not able to have meetings. So it all started over winter break. I was doing some game plan assignments, which is a learning platform that some athletic departments use. And there were athlete ally courses on LGBTQ inclusion. And before winter break, our SAC was trying to think of ways to include LGBTQ discussions within the upcoming events for the following or the next NCAA Diversity and Inclusion Week, which happens in the fall. And so I was thinking, okay, well, it's March, basketball is happening. Maybe we can start and kick everything off by having a pride night at our men's and women's basketball games. And so I pitched that idea to our SAC administrators, Megan, Casey, and Emily Howard, and they set a meeting up with the athletics marketing, and the athletics department was 100% for it. And they were so happy that athletes were behind it and wanted to do it. And they said that it was time that Monmouth had this event. We've seen more universities and organizations, sporting teams hosting pride nights and inclusive nights. And so I found that all of the administrators were really supportive and were helping us get things done and helping us design the graphics for a t-shirt and connecting us to the other organizations on campus. Monmouth does have an LGBTQ organization on campus that was pre-existing. And I had been to some of their events, mostly for extra credit for some of my classes, and wanted to make sure that they were a part of the event. And so they were there tabling with us, as well as other events and parts of campus. And I think as a whole, the athletic department and all of the administration was behind us 100% and glad that the athletes wanted to do it and wanted to put this on for everyone.
Jade, how about you? You're a coach now, but how has the administration support been, and maybe what have they been really helpful with, and what could you have used more of?
Yeah, I think for my organization specifically, because it was outside of athletics, I pulled on our Office of Common Ground, which was huge, and just kind of that support. And so the group is actually run out of the Office of Common Ground. And so in talking with, different resources around campus, pretty much we've utilized all the different offices on campus to help with outreach. That's kind of been our biggest success, because administration has been very great with, pushing our different events that we have and helping get the word out to the different subgroups of people that there are within different organizations. But I would say from an athletics standpoint, I don't know that my athletics department was as involved with this organization. Of course, there were student athletes that were a part of the group. But I think, like Jaden mentioned, in athletics, LGBTQ is taboo, and, there's some kind of dancing that you have to do in some spaces around it. And so I think, even right now, I just recently graduated, but seeing like student activism really and students really pushing to make sure their peers are heard has been one of the best things to come out of this, I think, is just seeing how much everybody is really supporting each other. And so I think, within the next year, we'll see, University of Richmond, do some really great things around LGBTQ student athletes and how to support them, but all student athletes as a whole. I think, sometimes there's so many different subgroups that need to, feel like they're welcomed and loved and supported. And a lot of, athletics departments are kind of grappling with where we start. And so, I appreciate everyone on this call for, just taking the initiative and doing it, because as student athletes, we do have so much to do. And so just being able to do that and out of your own heart to support some of your peers, I think is the greatest thing that I've seen out of it.
I think a lot of people in the public, when they hear college football players say that being gay or bi might be difficult on a college football team, they would say, oh, I can understand that. A lot of people in the public, they hear a women's basketball player say that, they say, oh, come on, there's all these lesbians in basketball. And I see, oh, you're all laughing, right? But there's still this perception that, oh, everybody's gay in women's sports. I'd love to hear, let's kind of just each of you, Jade and then Maggie and Caroline, talk about that, the importance of having support in women's sports, despite this stereotype. Jade, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I can kick it off. I think I've been out since sophomore year of high school. And so, when I got into college and went, I was a little hesitant at first to be like, well, where should I be at? Where should I not? And then I was just kind of like, whatever. And I know that's not the case for many folks. And so I think, being able to, representation is so important. But with that stereotype, like you said, like with women's basketball, for example, it might just be the assumption that, everybody's gay and that's just how it is. But it isn't. And I think that, knowing how these stereotypes play a role is important. And, in my own experience, having teammates who were always really supportive helped either way, whether you were straight, whatever, however you identified in any case. I think it's important to feel respected. And I think you can take that into any different identity. And so, I know that could be different on the football side or any other sport has different dynamics when it comes to LGBTQ. But I think with these different groups, it's starting to normalize that, it doesn't matter what kind of team you're on, because you can be on a women's basketball team and everybody's straight. So, you know what I mean? It doesn't, the team doesn't really define it. But I know that, with being on different teams comes different stereotypes from the outside. And so I think, we're seeing more of student athletes not really caring what those stereotypes are and just living and being themselves. And like Jaden, I remember seeing and reading about your story and just being like, wow, like the courage and, A10 schools, I'm all about A10. But, being able to see somebody who, is confident in their identity and is coming out in a way that makes people feel comfortable with it. It's kind of quirky, you know what I mean? Like just being able to see somebody as a leader, on any sports team, especially sports teams that are kind of struggling with LGBTQ identity, is phenomenal. So thank you all for that.
Maggie, your thoughts on that, the importance of women having organizations like this?
Yeah, so I'm like similar to Jade. I came out my freshman year of high school. So yeah, I've just like kind of always been out like in my teenage years. So that's like always been there. But I was always also the only out one on all of my teams. So you have this stereotype in women's soccer, like, oh, everyone's gay. And the whole time I'm like, where's everyone? Like, I'm the only one. So I don't know, like, I was like, darn, like I'm on the wrong team. But like that's like the like that was like it with like all my teams, all my club teams. And like same thing. I was kind of, yeah, you always joke like you have to come out to every new person you meet. And so like coming into college, like same thing. I was kind of like, I don't know, this is a Jesuit university, like not super religious. I don't know like kind of what's gonna happen. But yeah, same thing is that I was still the only out person on the team my freshman year. And that's changed. There's a couple more girls now, but just definitely having support for, like, we always have a pride game where we wear rainbow laces, and my coaches are super like supportive of that, making sure that we always have that. I think that like with my team, it's easy and it's good. With other teams, like it might not be the same way, which is part of the reason why we wanted to start this, especially in men's teams. But like for sure in women's teams, like Jaden and I, when we were starting this, we were like, who's gonna come? Like I think there's like a few kids that we know that like for sure would be there, but like there's so many that like probably like identify inside themselves as like whatever, but are definitely not comfortable on our campus yet. So I think that just like me and Jaden being like out there and being just like really proud and is just like the first step, kind of like first leader to do that. I've already had like a couple people come to us and be like you, like without this group, I would not like feel comfortable. And like I'm so grateful for you guys for starting this. And so we've already gotten a few of those. So like that's like been really awesome. But definitely just like having that kind of acceptance and kind of breaking down stereotypes of like what gay is supposed to look like and what sports are supposed to look like.
I, on the other hand, didn't come out until last year, but actually there were some athletes on the men's tennis team that were gay and that I had known about. And so that was kind of an anomaly that you knew that there was a men's athlete that was gay and out. But I think statistically, I mean, I got my Megan Rapinoe mug here, and I think she said it best when she said that you can't win a championship without gays. So, I mean, and that goes for every championship.
Amen to that. Jaden, flipping it on its head, coming from the football world, how have you gone about getting support for this group from your teammates on the football team and the coaching staff of the football team?
Yeah, my teammates are very supportive, and also my coaches. One thing that we love addressing is that we're brothers, and in this brotherhood, you accept everyone for who they are. And this was before I even came out. I came out October of last year. And when I came out, I thought it was going to be, I would get backlash. I would lose some friends that are teammates, but I didn't. And I don't, that was like the biggest impact on me. Hearing, just seeing all my teammates reach out saying um, how much they love and support me. My coaches calling me saying, if you need anything, to let us know. And I hope that's on everyone's football team, because I know that the bond you make within your team is very strong, because that's the guys, the girls that you struggle with every single day with the 6 a.m. lifts, practices. One thing that I do see, and I'm very happy for, is because I did come out, I've shown so many of my teammates that might have had the tendencies of toxic masculinity, that use slurs, not to. A really big thing I also see is they're more accepting because someone in their life identifies LGBTQ, because some of them might have not known one gay person their entire life. And coming to the meetings, I feel like they're coming in support of me, and I hope that they come in to support everyone on the call once they're on. A lot of my teammates, we had a call last night, and so many of them messaged me afterwards saying, "Hey, I had no idea about anything you just talked about," and they were just so happy to be informed, because they they don't know um, a lot of LGBTQ topics.
Again. Jaden, staying with you, I've got a question from Megan at Washington State University. They started this semester an LGBTQ IA plus group in the athletic department, which is amazing. But they haven't had any male identifying athletes come to the meetings. And we'll just start with you, Jaden, and see who else has some feedback here. Do any of you have any advice on how to promote the space and make the space more open to male athletes?
First, I would say addressing it, maybe reaching out to any male athletes that identify with the LGBT community. And if you don't have any, stating it on any social medias, saying, like I said before, you don't have to identify as anything, and kind of promoting that male athletes come, maybe even calling them out, say with a question, asking like, why don't they come to these meetings, and see their answer. I feel like when you kind of put things on people in a respectful way, um, it definitely gets their mind moving and intrigues them.
Anybody else? I mean, Caroline, I know that the organization was in part started by male athletes, so that changes things. Do you or anybody else have anything to add to that? How to reach male athletes?
For me, I just kind of made it like an expectation with a lot of my guy friends who are on like football and stuff. Like, you got to come to these. Like, even if it's literally just the first meeting to support me, like it really just. And there have been a few where we haven't had any guys on the call. But then there have been like I was really happy to see Jaden's teammates on the call yesterday. Like it's just like awesome that they like learned and stuff. But like really pushing your friends, like any male athlete that you're friends with, to come to the meeting, especially if allies are welcome. If allies aren't welcome, like that's kind of difficult, which is why I would encourage you to make it an open space for like allies and people who identify with the community, but like definitely harping on your male athlete friends to attend the meeting because that could be the catalyst.
Yeah, to go off that, I would just say once they see any male athletes there, it'll just work or spread, and it's just kind of ripple effect saying, oh, this maybe I won't be signaled out if I do come to this because there are other male athletes there.
Yeah, I agree with you both, and I completely understand like keeping it open. And with Shades of Pride, we kind of have like this dual system where some of our meetings are 100% closed, and like links only get sent to these people. But then there's meetings that we have where anybody can come. So I think that could also be beneficial, is just like kind of like mini partnerships that you can do where I know everything pretty much is online right now, but pre-COVID, what we would do is have like a cookie social, and anybody could come so that you can see, it's not just LGBTQ people. You could feel comfortable, kind of introduce yourself in that space. But I also do think there's value in having meetings that are, strictly just for LGBTQ folks who share the same experiences and kind of don't really have to explain themselves in some ways too. And so I think, one of the things that we kind of struggled with in the beginning was, okay, well, turnout. And I think, just kind of what I mentioned with, our numbers from 2018 to now, I think those athletes will start to come. And I think as long as those meetings are consistent and it's continuously advertised that this is for all LGBTQ student athletes, no matter your gender identity, I think that would really help. But I would, just encourage them to know that it's a safe space. And I think that they will come. And the other thing I will say is I feel like LGBTQ student athletes or LGBTQ people in general, once you're out or once you've kind of been exposed, you tend to know the other LGBTQ athletes in your space. So I think word of mouth is huge, and not demanding that this person come, but letting them know that you'll be there, and if they want to come, that you'll be there as a support for them as well. I think word of mouth kind of works the best in some ways too.
I think what Jaden said earlier about the environment of toxic masculinity in sports is very hard to dismantle in maybe such a short period of time because it's been so ingrained within athletics. But like everybody said, just making it, broadcasting that it is an inclusive space. And I think having a cookie social or an ice cream social or something where it's a neutral event is a great way to just get people at an event. I mean, who wouldn't want free ice cream or free cookies? You know that college kids love free anything, and athletes are always looking to eat. So you would just be there, and if somebody came up and asked you a question or something, be like, hey, this is what we're about, we're sponsoring this event. Or like Jade said, just word of mouth, getting it around.
Cookies are definitely a big draw. Right now, for a lot of us, it's hard to hand out cookies. And this question comes from Cami at Clemson University. They're struggling with programming during COVID. What kinds of topics would you suggest talking about during meetings right now? What events have you been doing virtually? How about Jade? What have you been talking about?
Yeah, I think we've been really trying to read the room, and like in initial meetings, like read the Zoom, if that's what you want to call it. But I think, we've really just been trying to see what students need. And, the LGBTQ space specifically is very different online. There's a lot of spaces where you can get on Zoom and everybody's comfortable, but with LGBTQ, that's a little bit different. And so I think just, in initial meetings, kind of just hearing and then talking to students after about what they think students want to hear, because I know it's different everywhere. And I know right now mental health is being talked about, and student athletes at my university are really talking about it. But I would also say, because of everything that's going on in the world right now, is more lighthearted events. I know we're planning to have a Zoom luncheon. So we'll have, our different members bring lunch and just talk. But then we're also planning an escape room. So I think it's also really pulling on the different resources at the university, because there are some very innovative folks who are coming up with things to do. But I think the biggest thing is just kind of, talking to student athletes and hearing what they want, because at the same time, everybody is zoomed out. So I totally understand that programming is hard, but I would say the biggest thing is probably more of the lighthearted events, where students can just have that space to let go.
Before the rest of you weigh in, I just want to add this. We have amazing, groundbreaking coach from Princeton University, Sophia Lewin, joining us, and she's curious, kind of off of programming, how do you use the programming, this virtual programming, to create a sense of community? And Jade, you had mentioned something lighthearted or an escape room. Again, programming, building sense of community in these virtual spaces. Any of the rest of you have some thoughts on that? Jaden, you just had a meeting, this week, you said?
Yeah, one thing that everything's virtual. So one thing we like to say is, hey, we go to Fordham, and the people that identify as LGBTQ, there's not many of us. So having the support system of each other is very important. And I know a lot of other people on the call were saying that this is maybe their senior year and they don't really know anyone from other sports. And having a place where, even if it's not LGBTQ topics, but having a place where athletes can come together to talk, because they do face similar struggles, even if it's not the same sport. To go off of the question about what we're doing, I'm kind of curious if the other groups are also virtual, but I think it works very well for us, because our topics are, well, our groups are just discussion based. So we pose questions and anyone can pose a question. I just kind of facilitate the questions. Like I make some questions I think people would like to talk about, but anyone's open to ask any. And in that space, it's kind of easier on Zoom because it takes away the nervousness a little bit, because you're not really in person with anyone. I wonder how it's gonna move, like switch over once we go in person. And I hope conversations are just as good, because I feel like most of everyone on our call feels comfortable enough to speak.
Okay, another question that we have from somebody from the high school world, Micah Porter, coach, athletic department. I think he's done everything at this point. What advice would you give to high school student athletes interested in starting a group like you all have? We talk a lot about college sports. It's a lot more college athletes are out by that age, but some high schools, they're looking to start organizations like this. What advice could you give from what you've learned at your college and university that could apply to high school students?
I think I personally am a very big advocate for when subgroups may already be small, including kind of everybody. And so I think with high school, I know in my high school, we started a GSA my senior year, and I can't even remember how many folks were a part of it, but I think it could be a great opportunity to make something like that available to all of the students in high school. I know high school is kind of the time where I was really struggling the most with my identity and trying to figure that out. And so I think the smaller we get with, subgroups, so if we say it's LGBTQ student athletes at that high school specifically, I think it gets harder, for folks to kind of really get involved. Because I know in my high school, I kind of identified more with the larger school than I did with just student athletes. So one of my recommendations would just be to start the group for everyone. And once you kind of gain a pulse for that group, if there's a large enough circle to kind of maybe make it a little bit more strategic for student athletes to identify. I think that could be the best route to go, just because of the numbers in that case.
Before Maggie, before you hop on, I want to throw a wrench into that a little bit. And I know that a lot of LGBTQ spaces end up being queer. And that might be a space that student athletes, they just don't want to be a part of that. Again, this was years ago, probably before you were born, but when I was at Stanford, the LGBTQ center was very queer, and I wasn't queer. So it's a delicate balance, how to figure out how to absolutely tap into the numbers that you talk about, Jade, while also building a space that some people may not feel comfortable, engaging in that space. Anyhow, Maggie, just off of that, your thoughts on that?
It's funny because that was exactly what I was going to say, is that like I never went to a GSA meeting in high school, and I was out all of high school. Like I wasn't like friends with that group of people. Like I don't know like why. Like I don't know, like I don't know anyone really from my high school. I had almost 5,000 people who went to my high school in the middle of Chicago. So super diverse high school. But like I wasn't friends with like anyone like me, basically. It was just like friends from my soccer team, and like there's a huge social circle. But like what I was gonna say is like make sure, I agree with Jade, like don't make it just student athletes, because like that's not gonna go over well. Like high school is like the time where it's awkward and people are really struggling with themselves, and like I don't know if I would have joined that group if I was like in high school, like, and I was like pretty comfortable with myself. So definitely making it like super lighthearted, like not super serious, not super exclusive is like the first step, and like getting a lot of people, a lot of friends kind of on board, I think would be a good idea, because like I don't know, like making maybe the first meeting is just like, let's talk about like how, I don't know, how the like election is going to affect this and that. Like there's like little things that you can make it where it's just a discussion and not necessarily like this is a group like for the gay kids, because I think that in high school like that's really tough, and times are changing, but like I was just in high school like a few years ago, and like that's how it was like, so I can't imagine that it's changed all that much. So yeah, that's the advice I would give.
You said keep it light, and then you want to start off with a conversation about how the election is going to affect us? Oh my gosh. I think, I mean, you have to reach out to, it could be a coach or a teacher or somebody in the school who you know that you can confide in and that you can trust. And maybe it just starts with one conversation, and maybe you can't start a group, or you don't end up being able to do that. But I think just confiding in somebody and sharing your idea, then when you share your idea, other people can then help lift you up and support you. But I also think that even if there is a group, and Maggie said that she was not friends with any of those people, never went to a meeting, whatever, but it's the fact that there is one and that people know about it. And so someone might not want to go to the meeting, but they know, okay, there are those people, like there are people who are like me, and it's okay if I don't want to maybe associate with them right now, or be stuck to that image or anything like that. But later on, it could be a sense of community, even if they're not part of that community right then.
I love that you brought that up. One of the biggest things is just normalizing everything, and the idea of having something, even if you don't put yourself into that group or put yourself into that scenario, you know that there are people that will accept you. And I feel like that can be very impactful to people that you would never even know of, because they keep it to themselves. But yeah, I love that you brought that up.
For all of you, another question. What have coaches or mentors done or said that made you feel more comfortable with being yourself. This is maybe a little bit aside from building an organization, but still maybe they've shown support for your organization, or they've said something to you or done something that really made you feel more comfortable. Just anything your coaches or mentors have done that have helped you. Jade?
Yeah, I think coaches and mentors played a huge role, and in my experience, I think they have been the most impactful. You know, with my team, I had that network, and I always knew they were going to be there. But I think, you know, going into a meeting and we're going over our handbook and hearing your coach say that there's no discrimination allowed in this locker room, there's no discrimination regardless of race, gender, and then including sexual orientation. I think that's one of the biggest things, and not being able to say boyfriends aren't allowed in the locker room, girlfriends aren't allowed in the locker room. You know what I mean? Like, just having that candid nature when it comes to talking about relationships, when it comes to talking about anything LGBTQ related. And I know at my school we have like safe zone training, which I know a lot of schools may have adopted in their different ways. And I think it says something outwardly to have a safe zone rainbow sticker on your door in your office, but it means something different when I'm going through, you know, coming out, or I'm having a relationship struggle, and I actually know that I can come into your office and there's not going to be an awkward pause when I say I have a girlfriend and this is what I'm going through right now. And it does take a lot of learning on the coaches and mentors part, but I think, you know, knowing that I had somebody to go to and knowing outwardly how they felt about my identity and what I was going through was the most important thing to me. And I think just them hearing me out and being able to go into the office and feel comfortable speaking to them, because they've said off the jump, this is what my expectations are, this is what I want you to feel comfortable talking to me about.
Jaden, you were going to say something before I jumped in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one thing that was really impactful to me was when I came out on Instagram. I just felt like that was more comfortable for me to come out to a lot of people, so I don't have to keep saying it over and over. And the next day, my coach brought the team together and addressed it, which I very much appreciated, because then it made it not a rumor that was going around. It was addressed and it was said, and he stated, there will be no discrimination. If there is, there will be discipline and maybe withdrawal from the team, because we will not accept that. But all in all, just stating it and making it a part of a conversation is just very helpful to any athletes that might even be in the closet, because you're addressing it and understanding that you're accepting that it is a thing.
I want to thank all of you for joining and start to wind us down. There's been a lot of really great ideas here, ways to make it a safe space while also an inclusive space, including non-LGBTQ people, different events to do, different ways to build community. I love for each of one of you just to kind of end us off with the one big takeaway that you'd like people to walk away from this with about building support groups for LGBTQ student athletes. And Caroline, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I would just say that if you are starting a group, or if you are in the process of coming out, there are people who will support you. And like Jaden said, he thought he was going to face a lot of backlash, but he didn't. He just faced acceptance. And I think the biggest thing is that you are not alone. You're joining a community, and that's something that I never thought that it would feel like or that it would be, but it certainly is a community and people want to help you.
Maggie?
Yeah, I think that a huge thing is like inclusive language just in general. Like, if just like making that a thing on your team, whether that's from coaches or players, like inclusive language. And like in terms of starting a group, definitely like finding like an administrator at your school, or like like a teacher or a professor or whatever to go to who maybe has more connections like outside of the students is like really important. Like that was so key, is having my associate athletic director Janan to be able to go to her, and I knew like she knows everyone, she knows all of us, and like so that was like I knew I could go to her, like I know I can text her and whatever. So like that is like a huge thing, especially like from an administrative standpoint. Like if you want to start a group, is like making sure that you're reaching your student athletes.
And if I would add to that, with inclusion, helping people understand language in and around trans athletes, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, even within the LGBTQ community, about proper and appropriate language in that space. Jade, how about you?
Yeah, I think echo everything everybody else has said. But what came to mind when you said that, and the ESPNW summit was yesterday, and a lot of that has kind of been sitting on my mind. And there was a session with Abby Wambach and Glennon Doyle, and one of the things that Glennon Doyle said was, all anybody needs is permission to fully be themselves. And I think as administrators and mentors, we look up to you all so much. And so, kind of embodying that, and, letting athletes know that they can show up to the table and, change every day, but at the end of the day, that they're always going to be held, and know that they can be free when they come to you. And I think, one of the things that they mentioned on this summit was to get a seat at the table and blow up the culture. They use that language, but they said, blow up the culture once you get a seat at the table. And I think, keeping that in mind and just including LGBTQ athletes in the conversation and supporting athletes.
Jaden, your big takeaway, and also before you end, tell us about that flag behind you.
Yeah, this is my bisexual flag. I have it up right there, so that's on my Zoom call. So if I get on meetings anywhere, for school, it just for something just to normalize everything. Actually, one of my classmates seen that and then put his up the next day. It was like, thank you. I was so scared to put mine up, and just that just shows it's just a ripple effect. One takeaway I would definitely like to say is, don't be afraid. Just rip the Band-Aid off. If you're an administrator, reach out to your students. If you're a student, reach out to your administrator and see what it is, because you can be afraid, but without taking that step, nothing will happen. And one of the biggest things that I always push in the meetings and just in my everyday life is the need to normalize LGBTQ topics. And I always harp on that.
Our tagline at Outsports is "Courage is contagious." When one person's courageous in their life, it inspires somebody else to do the same. And I think all of you are examples of that, and really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with other people. If you want to reach out to any of these folks, you can find them online, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm sure they are ready, willing, and able to give you any advice they can. Thank you all so much, and best of luck to you.